Well, hello everybody. We're going to talk about PTR and PTR 1, I should say. We're going to talk about reminder that it's closing today. What we got coming in the next PTR. We're going to talk about your feedback and what we have worked on and kind of what's coming next. So yeah, as a reminder, PTR 1 is closing today, and first and foremost, thank everybody so much for participating in it. We got a ton of awesome feedback. Like 100%, you guys are always awesome again with the whole like getting things, put good feedback together, participating in that form that was posted for feedback. I also I got to say, I love the tone and of the feedback and the way you guys are sharing things that are important to you and being very transparent and open. And I think that's awesome instead of just getting a bunch of robotic feedback. And so again, just really great appreciation to the community again for that. Fat thank yous. We can't do it without you. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about our next steps. So we're shutting down the PTR 1. We're collecting the feedback, as you know, and Devin will get into this a little bit later. We've already started to address some of the feedback. All of it is super important. There's just some pieces of that feedback are a lot harder to implement than not, and so we want to be really careful and digest all the different avenues and possibilities for that feedback to address those issues, and then kind of go from there. But we've already started to do like little things like fixing the hair bug with the helmets and stuff like that. So we're going to keep going on with both the little fixes and then kind of the bigger ones that involve some redesign stuff. Also, so for what's coming in the next PTR 2, we're going to open up the next 2 zones in Levea. So that is the Willowcrest Farms, the Wilds, continue the story, and then on into the kind of the Stone Quarry, which some of you have explored by running around, and the content that's in there in the first dungeon. So we're super looking forward to letting that go for the next PTR. We're also going to bring in the first look at the next profession of blacksmithing and armor crafting and that stuff. Now, as we discussed, we asked the community if they're okay with a flat version UI of what we're doing while we're working on the VR interaction. Resoundingly, everybody replied they'd like to see the recipes, ingredients, and crafting that we've had in our back pocket, even if it's more of a flat UI for that comes up in VR, while we're working on the actual physical VR mechanics. And so we listened, and we're going to take that route. So the next PTR, you will see crafting NPCs and the recipes. You can go gather stuff. You can start to make stuff and look at the different items and kind of the scaling that we're going to be doing. And then you'll see that progress to being replaced by the physical VR interaction mechanics that we actually want to have for our crafting. Let's see what else. Yep, so the new zones, the dungeon, crafting is coming. You guys have already seen the mailbox, which was something that we wanted to do kind of along with starting to look and think about how we're handling guilds and everything else and storage. These are all kind of the part of the same group of tasks that we want to do. But we know that we're lacking in that physical trade that we used to have. We had kind of a template for it, like back in the Alpha 1 and Alpha 2 timeframe. It just didn't work out for us. And so we kind of back pocketed that. But it's hard now that we have professions. And one of y'all really pointed this out well in the community chat is it's hard to have professions if you can't trade the items that you craft. So the mailbox system will solve that in the meantime while we're working still on that physical trade-off hand-to-hand with people. So at least now you can mail items, you can mail money, and you can mail letters to people online or off. So that will work now. And you can find, for those who haven't seen it yet, in the PTRs, the mailbox is right outside the taverns, and we're going to continue with kind of that theme. So if you see a tavern, you know there's going to be a mailbox nearby. With that, I will hand off to Devin to talk more specifically about the deeper community feedback, the what we have addressed, and then kind of how we're approaching some of those bigger ticket items.
Yep. So I want to preface a little bit with something Tyler already said a little bit. We've kind of got a game plan for moving forward with our content release, as well as trying to work on a lot of the feedback notes and bug fixes at the same time. And so I want to start with the whole point of PTR was to collect feedback. It's going to take us a little while to action on it. We are still in the full swing of finishing content for the regions so that it's not a really short, empty experience, while also trying to chew on some of the feedback we've gotten from things. And some of those points of feedback, we'd asked about how our warden pets are feeling, and it was a resounding, hey, way better. There's still some more that we can do to make that improved, but for the time being, we get to kind of just, cool, it works. We can put them into the launch now, because the original plan was to not put them into launch. So I'm glad that the fix that we did is kind of landing well and is behaving the way we expected it to. So that's awesome. We made some changes to our HUD with the wrist stuff, and we forced it wrist only, the first PTR, and got a lot of feedback on it. And the second time around, it's now going to be the version that floats in front of your face as well as the one that's on your wrist, so that we can continue to get a little bit more feedback on it. As well as our quick slots. They definitely need some love, and we're going to continue to work on them. And we've gotten a lot of feedback on how we want to continue moving forward with interaction. So that the quick slots one is going to take us a long while to chew on, because it's such a deep system in how we interact with the game. And we want to make sure that we are handling it in a way that isn't working backwards. We also got a couple of major bug reports and things that we discovered. When we first launched the PTR and everybody flooded in, everyone was a white wisp. And that is part of our performance system that kind of attempts to manage the amount of players being loaded in at the same time. And we had never been able to brute force test it with so many players. This is the first time we've had that many players all in a confined area at once. And I realized that it didn't. When I say that many players in an area, I mean like the whole island, because we're attempting to load in as many players as possible, as far out as possible. And now we get to try and rein in how it works. We still need to understand exactly why most players were wisps for a solid 5-10 minutes, and then nobody was a wisp. That's not how the system's supposed to work. So right. we've got some further investigation to figure out what caused it. It seemed like after that initial day that it wasn't really. I didn't see it anymore. Even hopping in and playing with players a couple, like the day after, or the night after we had launched, after that initial burst, it wasn't. I didn't really see a whole lot of wisps. So
yeah, the original intended purpose was for lower end devices that had a cap on the number of player renderings you could see at a time, because that takes up a significant amount of resources. And we wanted to size the group right, where it would prioritize party members first, and it would also limit the group size to like the maximum we want for a raid later, prioritizing those first 10 people. So we're still ironing out the bugs, and so there will always be a Wisp system. That's just what we have to have for, again, I will said, cell phone strapped to your face. It's got limitations.
The goal has always been to have some sort of stand-in when we couldn't load everybody all at once. And this is genuinely the first time we really saw it to an extent, because we had never we made the system and then we let it sit, because we weren't really seeing it needed up until now with the way that our content was spaced. And we kind of expected faction merge to kind of bring these issues forward, as well as like some server infrastructure things. And so we're also working on a lot of back end ways to test and monitor our servers. Nobody really gets to see that, but it's very, very important to making sure that things are stable and that we can have the massive part of MMO. So yeah, that's the Wisp is something we're big working on. I think, did you already mention the hair in your face? That was one of the we had a handful of visual bugs that are still getting worked on. The missing wrists on some of the armor sets and things like that have been resolved, as well as the hair in your face and thing like that. Then there's the it's a recurring thing that we're finding in our setup, that there's a couple lingering things from Region 26 that are set up in some of the item tables that are causing some of the rewards for our quests to give out the wrong thing. Like our flesh hoods. Whenever you there was an NPC that he gives out helmets, and if you grab the leather one, it's just this flesh-colored helmet that sits on your head, and it's super goofy. So those issues get resolved as we continue our work on the content and iron that out. And that kind of stuff is going to be really important to point out with our next PTR. We're intending to test at that point. We want to start thinking really seriously about the speed at which you progress and how your gear affects your builds, as well as trying to make sure that all of the extra little bugs when it comes to quests get ironed out, of like, oh, this one gave out the wrong reward. That was wrong. Let's go fix it. As well as like the things that get harvested. A lot of that wasn't really the focus of this PTR. It was mostly all feedback on the changes and the new features. And while we absolutely welcome a lot of those things getting pointed out this time around, we already know about them, and we're already working on them, and a lot of them are getting fixed as we go. Some of them won't get caught by the time we have the next PTR, and there will be new ones for some of the stuff that we introduce. So that's going to be really important to get pointed out. It's going to be a fun time getting that feedback, because it's gonna kind of feel like y'all are harping on us, like, here's this thing that's broken, why the hell is it broken? And we're going to be like, we're sorry, we keep breaking things. But like, we have to test those things, and we can't test them internally very quickly. So that's the whole point of PTR, is to be able to get that feedback really, really fast whenever we need it. What else are we working on? Am I missing anything? We talked about the crafting that's coming in, and the balance for the skills and progression. Am I missing something from our list, Tyler?
Nope.
Okay, I think I've hit most of it. It's really easy to focus in on any individual thing and go on for an hour.
Yep, and to address that question, it was in chat. We're speeding up XP in the current PTRs just so you get through stuff faster. That's why you can hit level 10 like right away. The actual design for launch for this is zones 1 and 2 that you guys have already seen. Actually, only takes you to about level 5 with the actual XP ramps, and then zones 3 and 4 are levels 5 through 10. The first dungeon is designed to be right around level 10. Now we'll probably be speeding XP up again for the next PTR. We haven't quite landed on what we're doing with that yet. We may put in the real XP tables to test balance, or we'll just leave it at the sped up version so you guys can OP and get through the content quickly.
Yeah. At some point we'll want to test it, but we're not sure if it'll be right out the gate with this next. The real important thing is we're getting the call out. The content. That's the next step. Is get the content first, and then we can test the rest.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, Rayson brought up a good point with now that we brought back the skill reset person, we can actually go work on putting in the actual XP tables because people can reset now. Yeah.
When we put out our mailbox, was it yesterday? For Wednesday.
Wednesday, I think.
We put that patch out with the mailbox, and we put it out knowing full well that our keyboard is definitely going to get pointed out and needs love. And it has been pointed out a couple times.
The keyboard is my personal least favorite feature about Ilysia, but it was never really used except for putting in dev commands.
I think there's a culmination of a couple different things that need love that will make, even if we don't redo the keyboard, which I think we should, but even if we don't, if we fix all the things around it that are causing it to feel really bad, then the last step is the actual keyboard itself needs love.
Right. But now that mail's a thing, we know that it's much more prominent into the user to type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's...
All right, next is going to be, you talked about the quick slots, you talked about the bug systems. We didn't cover POI stuff.
You're right, we didn't. That's something that everybody noticed very, very quickly when they got into the PTR, was that you went to your quest giver, you took the quest, you put your hand over your head, and then you can't see where the thing is at. And that's goofy. And there's been a handful of bugs that we're continuing to discover. It's kind of like It's kind of like my old Volkswagen. We it had an oil leak and we fixed that and found out it had a coolant leak afterwards, and then we fixed that and now it needs a new this, that, and the other. We don't have that car anymore. But we we're spotting a couple handful of hiccups that all kind of compound to the same thing. There's also been some point outs that some players prefer that our POIs kind of be a little less direct and spot on for like go and kill this thing quest or go find this thing, and instead like here's the general area and go find it there. And
Yeah.
I think we're already starting to lean towards that a little bit with some of the quests. It's just we don't have a whole lot of them yet that need those.
Yeah, and it's funny because we got a lot of early feedback. I remember that after A2 where people wanted tighter POIs. Like they wanted the stuff to come back to be like, hey, I want to know exactly. And I remember what quest did it. It was that old spider mine that was above, kind of in the mountains over by Crickdale back in the old days.
Yeah.
And we put the original marker for the lost bow that was in there at the entrance of that cave. And the resounding feedback we got was that, can you actually just point it at the actual bow, and then we'll know to go in the cave instead of. So we go back and forth, but I think it's, general area is probably what you're saying is what people are kind of looking for.
Yeah,
Within a certain number of yards of a thing, so you actually at least have some challenge to go look for it and find it.
it's something we may eventually also use. Our minimap has a couple of functions that can easily be extended to allow us to kind of make those general areas visible, where the Wadar didn't really have a functionality that just said go to this general area, so it got confusing. But if you have a painted area on the minimap that's just like anywhere within this painted area, then it kind of sticking to the design point of other games on how that gets handled. So we might be able to extend and go that route, but I'm not sure yet. There's a lot of design discussion to be had about how we want that to work.
Right. So for the two questions that just popped up, for future PTRs after we're done with basically what's happening in Levea, yes, we will be testing higher level content and we'll be coming up with PTR characters that are preloaded. We've talked about that internally. We're still sorting that out. So you don't have to start all the way over. Like sometimes we'll want to test a specific dungeon with some new mechanics in it, and we'll make sure that the characters that you make for that PTR are capable of actually doing the dungeon.
Similar to how on our tutorial island you spawn in and you've already got some stuff in your backpack, that's kind of how we're going to handle that. Is you'll spawn in, you'll be a high enough level, you can go allocate your skill points how you please, and you'll already have some gear in your inventory, and then you can go test the high level stuff.
Yep. And then about the NPCs, we knew that for PTR1. All the NPCs in Levea are the same during dev, and then they get updated. But there was just a massive check-in for all the NPCs that you've already seen are now getting their actual skins, and they won't all be guards. So you'll start to see the racial diversity and the kind of the look and clothes and feel to fit more of their profession and what they do.
Yep. And then our moderator Raceland asked about some of our targeted skills not quite working in an intuitive way, and yes, that is absolutely on our radar. We've been discussing that a couple times internally already, that hey, these skills need some attention. So we will have a phase where we take a pass on skills. It might not happen. I can say pretty confidently it's probably not going to happen before we launch the next PTR, just because we're so heavy in the make sure all the content is in phase. But then it's definitely we have a pretty it's continuing to grow every day list of things that, like, okay, once we launch this, we get this content in and we go get it in and have folks start testing on the next quests to make sure nothing there is broken. Now we can start looking at making sure skills are doing the right things, and we can talk more about quick slot design and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And healing is the first thing we're looking at in that conversation, because we all agree as well.
What's the point of having a healer if you can't do the thing for your party? Yeah. We totally agree that's a little that's a little silly.
That was a boo-boo that did not work as intended.
Yeah.
So, yep. Awesome. Are we ready to just kind of do more of an open Q&A?
I
We've
think
got
so.
some time left here. It's a design thing that we've talked about. We just haven't spent any time implementing that idea yet. As you know, the pets that level, we can have change size, but I think that's just about the only thing we've discussed, and it's only been tertiary conversations. But we're aware that it's a request.
Yeah. There's also the feedback point that some of our pets right now are just a bit small. The wolf is tiny. The crab is bigger than the
It's a
wolf.
puppy. Yeah.
Yeah. So we
That's
might
actually what led into the
make
whole
some.
conversation. It's like, this is a tiny
Yeah.
puppy. Is it supposed to grow up?
Yeah, yeah.
So the whole thing, yeah.
So we may initially increase the size just a little bit while it's not doing anything. And then when we can start iterating on how they grow and get stronger as your dedicated skill point allocation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll discuss that some more. And yeah.
Earlier at regarding the Wisp. Corvid says Wisp system is good. Will there be a way for it to prioritize friends so they always appear?
Yep, that's kind of the way that we're trying to make it work right now. It prioritizes currently your party.
Yeah.
Which I recognize is a little bit like if you just got into the game, you're not in a party. But also sometimes party retained depending on how long you've been off or on. So that if you leave the game and
That's an
come back, your
interesting
party is
idea,
still
though.
there.
Let's take that
But
back to
yes,
the team, Devin, and jot that down. If we have the code anyway for prioritization, maybe we can double step it at some point. We can investigate that.
yeah,
Prioritizes party, and then outside of party, secondary priority is friends, and then
yeah,
everybody else.
yeah. Or even
Yeah.
guild once we reintroduce guild.
Exactly.
And I think that point of feedback was also given for the mailbox of right now the only way to mail something is to type somebody's name directly, and why not give us a list of friends to select from on top of that so that it's easy to keep mailing things back and forth to the people you care to keep mailing things to. Or even your own characters. Might not be horrible.
Yeah.
Someone asked.
200 and something, I think was the number.
I can go confirm now that stats have updated. At least on the meta side, it was something like 100 or 200. I need to.
Yeah.
And that's half of our population, at least according to the feedback thing that we had. Most of our players now are Quest 3 or PCVR. There's a very small amount of Quest 2
It's interesting
holdouts.
that the Quest 2 has dropped off that much. It's much faster than we anticipated. But for all those people out there, it's still, though, I refuse to test on any other platform but the Quest 2 just to take the torture pain points myself, because we've got to see what this game feels like on the lowest common denominator. And we don't get to deprecate the Quest 2 support until Meta does, which I think they said is 2028. So we got a road.
So if I filter by our PTR versions, yeah, it's about 100 for meta, which puts us at 200-ish total. Which is a lot for just a PTR. PTR doesn't account for, it's kind of only people that are in Discord and know about it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. 90% of our customer base doesn't even know about this Discord.
Yep.
Or care to join. I've actually gotten that feedback directly from people in the wild that I've talked to, like out in real life, that I have no interest in joining a Discord. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I feel like
it's fair. Totally fine.
I've had a couple people I talk to. I'm like, oh yeah, I work on VR games. And they're like, oh, what game? And I'm like, it's called Ilysia. And they're like, I've heard of that. I'm like, yeah, you should come through our Discord. And they're like, no, I don't like Discord. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Glad you're enjoying the game, I guess.
Rune says, I want to be able to name my crab. Of very high importance.
I don't actually know I can't give a valid, like, good, accurate answer on whether or not we'll be able to do that quickly. I agree with it. I have no
Yeah.
clue how that stuff works in the code right now.
That would have to be taken back and chewed on for a little bit.
Yeah.
Demethel's got a good idea. It's been a while since we actually went through and directly talked about the questions that are in the Tavern Talk question channel. Is there any stuff we can grab from there?
Yeah, I pulled from it during the last Tavern Talks as well. So a lot of what's left over is actually a lot of Demethel's much more technical questions. Want to go through those?
We
Sure,
can
we
try.
can.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I am happy to entertain any question. If the answer is I don't know or we're not going to talk about it, I'm also not afraid of saying either of those things. So, fire away.
Yeah.
So Demethel had skills. I think a couple of these didn't ask last time. But first question was, how many levels do you want the skills to have? And the second was, do you plan on having to train skills by performing different along with investing skills?
Both of those things have been talked about. I'll talk about the second one more than the first. Non-combat skills is how we encompass that entire question. I think that's what the point of that question is, and it is something we still want to do, is craft proper crafting trees that are available at the trainer for you to spend a different skill point currency on. We don't think the right thing to do is to spend the skill points that you get from leveling up on having to choose between either crafting or combat. That's kind of why that stalled out. We're looking at the design around different sets of trade skill points that are separate from your combat skill points. If that answers that question.
On to his next set of questions. Pops up and asks for clarification. Let's see. We had about physics-based weapons. Is the current version of melee and ranged attack timing damage calculation?
No. The balance on damage also feels really bad because you're so OP on the PTR right now. So once proper leveling, and so you're staying at the proper pace with the bombs around you, it will feel better. It's close to what we want. Archery is still something that's going to change ultimately. It's going through a redesign on internally. The archery being magic and rune based is not what we wanted. We're going to move to a more ammo based traditional archery system where those skills that you have are arrows types instead that you actually have to carry. So the no range is not where we want it to be, but the damage, the feeling of damage itself on the next PTR, that power scale you'll feel if we don't speed up the XP, will be more in line with what you're looking for, where the progression will feel better. Your power versus a mob will feel much more balanced. Mobs will actually be dangerous again, so because you're not like 5 times their level, instantly. So yeah, that's a good question to ask after we get the feedback from when we do the proper XP curve.
I got to follow up on the skills question. How are combat skills?
Combat skills are right now the skills themselves don't level. You just your combat skills augment your current power of your weapons. So like charge strike, for example, is dependent on the weapon damage itself. So it's charge strike will always be a skill that you take that you invested one skill point in. But charge strike, the point is it never becomes useless. It still becomes a skill that you would use at level 5 and would use at level 55.
Back to their weapons question. They ask, how do you plan on giving different skills for each weapon type, notably by giving...
We are not a physics-based blade and sorcery style thing. That's really, really, really hard to do on an MMO network. What we talked about is and come up with internal stuff for simulated physics that is client side. I'm not going to get into that sauce right now, but it is something we want to do to make more interesting, especially as we bring in two-handed weapons. So it's on the radar, but if again, I'll caution people about expecting stuff like blade and sorcery in an environment where it's this network heavy and dependent.
Yeah. I do want to also elaborate. Corvid asks if axes will at least have a bit more punch than swords. And up front, I think they're going to behave exactly like swords, axes and maces will. But our goal for how to get those away from being quite the same as swords is to have them have different like damage types applied. A lot of the things that we discuss is kind of how I think it's how Skyrim
Like
does it as well.
Swords being better at crit, axes adding bleeds, and blunts ignoring armor.
Yeah.
Those are the type of the combat enhancements we're thinking about, and you also see those reflected in their trees.
Walking Dead asks, I see the map coming up, which is nice. Will there eventually be, like, I can click or create waypoints or X marks the spot? Also, is teammates on the Waydar still in the works?
Good questions. We haven't revisited that for a while. So I can't say that we've made any discussions internally about furthering the idea of the teammates thing. I'm specifically talking about. We actually haven't talked at all about letting people write on their minimap. That's not been a topic yet at all. That's a new question.
Yeah.
But as far as the teammates thing goes, seeing people in your party specifically has been discussed internally quite a bit.
Yeah. Don't think we've made action towards it just yet, but it is something that we kind of all agree is necessary.
I'd like to know your plan.
And like again, when you take a skill right now, you take the skill and you get it and it scales with you. There can be more advanced versions of those skills later in the trees that further buff them. Like, using some of the magic stuff, the base fire skills can bump your fire damage a bit, but one of the much higher tier fire skills will bump damage even more. But as far as like I take Charge Strike, for example, and then the more I use Charge Strike, the more powerful it gets. Like it has its own levels internally. Is not in our design.
Yeah, I think I'm making an assumption here, and please, Demethil, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you're trying. I think you're asking if we're leaning a little bit more towards the way that like ESO does their leveling progression with certain things. So like if I am going down the martial tree and I am using melee weapons, that's what levels up my martial skill, versus if I use a bow, that levels up my warden skill. And then even a little bit further into if I use this skill specifically, it levels up that skill, and then I can upgrade and augment it with an extra buff. Yeah, I love those systems. I don't know if they necessarily fit into our current design.
No, and what Raceland just typed in there is what the current design is. Yes, you will get better versions of stuff later, but skills won't improve with usage, like you're saying, Dem. That's not what we're doing.
Walking Dead
That
had
is sort of how cooking will work, or professions, like we said, right?
Professions do, but combat skills don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, two different systems.
Walking Dead had a whole list of questions. Fishing.
How dare you?
Let's see. What is the plan here with leveling up? Will you be able to catch more fish more often? A certain level before you can even catch a certain fish? Will there be deeper spots out in the ocean or rarer fishing spots? do it from there because there's a couple.
Yeah. The base mechanic is exactly as you would expect, and you'll see this, is that certain fishing spots will require a higher fishing level to even fish there at all, much like World of Warcraft and a lot of other MMOs do it. But in general, we have also talked about the fact that, as you get better at a profession, you'll get better quality results out of using that profession, and fishing is part of that too. So a chance at rare fish, maybe catching more than one fish at a time, those type of things, changing the time it takes to catch a fish. So faster reel and that kind of stuff, those type of things you can expect to see improved, like as you level up.
The next couple questions were, will there be random items added in there? Not just junk boot, but a rare earring. And will there be more fishing poles added in the future? Nicer poles or something like that?
Yes, nicer poles is a plan, and also poles that you can move faster with, that have more complex stuff on them. Like right now, you've got the base pole that's just fling a thing out there and then you drag it in. But higher level poles might, actually have a pulley on them, so you can go faster, but you'll have to grab it with the other hand and actually reel in. So we do want to have improvement and actually tie that in with crafting in other, other professions, like the woodworking that we're planning on doing later. It's like other people can make you higher quality fishing poles, that kind of stuff.
Racelyn mentioned arrow crafting. Would be great tie-in content. The idea of being able to craft specific arrows, like fire arrow.
I think different arrow types that we're talking about for the future revisions of the Warden are the skills unlock the different arrow types you have access to, not so much that they're crafted by other people. And yes, cooking is going to get more complex. We're also thinking about how to make that wheel game a little bit harder as you go up with, different things you can do. But what we're really leaning on for design for cooking complexity is that cooking recipes become ingredients for other recipes. Think about it that way. Like cooking a large beneficial dungeon meal might require the player that's crafting these things and doing the cooking to cook multiple things from around the world, that they will then turn into the base ingredients for a larger dish that would be dungeon quality food.
Anne says, I need to satisfy my VR smoking addiction. Will there be safe?
No. I will refrain from comments on other internal conversations about, boy, we should have things to be able to drink at the Wenching Whale, though. So we have talked about what they should do to people's, like, hey, well, then we wouldn't have to fix the stuttering UI. We would just call it, a feature of hanging out too much in the pub.
Yeah.
In the Tavern Talk questions forum, question related to smoothing. Any chance of implementing any type of smoothing? Menus attached towards the hands to shake quite a bit, as well as buttons. Steering is a bit jarring and
So that is a side effect. I presume you're specifically talking about when playing on standalone Quest. We have a technique called application space warp that gets used to help keep performance stable with all the different things that can be going on in the game. And we are investigating potentially removing application space warp as the game has become more and more performant over time, and if especially if the Quest 2 is deprecated fairly quickly, that kind of means that we don't. It's kind of only needed on the Quest 2. We have it on the Quest 3 as well for stability reasons, but we have been changing up some of the ways that we handle some of the UI specifically, so that it's a little bit smoother and doesn't do the nasty judder. And actually, we do have some. I think was that in our last patch where we put the HUD in and did some smoothing fixes? I think it was. I believe it was in the patch notes.
Yeah, I know it was in the last internal build.
Yeah, so it might not have made it into the patch. I think it did, but that continues to be something we're constantly working on. And it's also part of why we are so adamant about investigating changes that can be made to our HUD design that just kind of lean away from things that would cause the stutter or make the stutter more visibly frustrating. It's difficult to remove entirely, but alleviating it so it's not impeding gameplay is always the goal. Eventually, when we're able to, we do want to remove the technique entirely because our game has just continued to become more and more performant.
Right.
I also
Orbit,
see
to answer your question about character customization, as far as different things about character customization, like other options, like probably not, but more of the options that we do have on those sliders is something that we want to do, like eventually. Just more mustaches, more hair types, more skin tone options, that kind of a thing. But
yeah.
we're not going to go add in like fingernail length and you know earlobe drop and that kind. We're not going to add different options like that.
Yeah.
Orvid followed that up. Cat girl.
Got to wait for a different race for that one.
Was a man.
That's actually coming.
We're
We actually are going to be introducing the first pieces of something that we just jokingly refer to as Toco Ball, and you'll see it. And it happens at the inn, and it's a fun thing to goof around with. You'll start to see that in coming builds.
Yeah. Wasteland asked about what's going on with water. That's a fun call out. I was hoping nobody was going to notice. Our water right now for Levea is a stand-in at the moment as we're finalizing the actual. It takes some extra content authoring, for lack of a better explanation, and it requires a little bit of extra setup to do, and it hasn't been finished yet. So we're using a stand-in version visual for the water that doesn't quite look the way that we like, but right now what it does and what drives me absolutely bonkers is it looks totally different between PC VR and Quest. And the version that we were using for Ainur was using that fancy specially authored stuff that allows you to keep the look between PC VR and Quest the same. So we will get back to that, but for now we're using a stand-in.
We're throwing specifically more evil type.
Yeah,
and chess.
The crux of all that is still server authoritative, networked, synced objects that play well in our engine and what we're doing. And so the ball is why we're starting with that effort. This will lay the groundwork for every other kind of interactive game we want to have. So we're starting with something simple, like just a ball that people throw around, and make sure it has the proper physics, that those physics are paid attention to and broadcast across all the clients, that the server is in charge of the ball, not other people. Things like what happens when somebody tries to steal the ball and run away. So we're handling all of that. And those are all the design questions we've had to answer on, and that's why we're starting with the ball. But it sets the precedent for how we're going to handle the rest of everything. But we do want to have more games, more things to do. That is something we'd also like to see available while you're waiting for your friends or goofing around Ilysia and just hanging out at the tavern, whatever, just more things to do.
Graceland asks, has there been discussion on loot rolling when in a party? Right now, anyone?
Correct. It is free for all loot. We know it's annoying. It is on our list of things we want to address. We just haven't gotten down there yet. But we also agree it's not ideal. Personal loot is what we want, much like a system where it's not rolling on it. The first change you'll see is that people see their own loot.
Been asked, is there more of a way to support the game buying the base 10?
Not at the moment. The best way to support us is to provide feedback and tell your friends we're here and that we are still working on this and that we're dedicated and committed and making progress.
We are working towards providing better ways for support. I think I mentioned, I think it was a week ago or so in the general chat when because that's a pretty commonly asked question, and we are discussing internally a lot of the different possible options. I know a lot of people have thrown out the ideas of potentially a subscription model or a battle pass or different things like that. And I think one of the easiest to implement and least intrusive things that we're discussing a lot more heavily is a kind of an in-game cosmetics shop.
Yes.
And
you'll see that come later.
Yeah, we're leaning towards that, especially because a lot of the setup for it gives us the ability to start leaning into and bringing out a lot of the backer rewards that folks have asked for. That some of them have been finished and haven't been able to come in yet because we haven't had the systems to give them to players yet, and that cash shop allows us to do some of that.
Both the Meta and Steam platform copies. So that's unreal. I want to ask issue Quest 3 Vox.
We're still investigating that and haven't been able to find a concrete, like, here's what's broken. We're having trouble recreating it because a lot of our team tests on Quest 2, Quest 3, PCVR. We kind of do all of it, and we haven't been able to discover the cause for that, let alone properly reproduce it yet.
Two questions on player housing. Mounts.
Player housing, don't have an ETA on that yet. It's an entire massive body of work that is still in the to be touched phase. Small team blues. As far as mounts go, though, it's funny. Stay out of our conversations. Whoever's listening, we've been talking a lot about this internally with planning the content that's coming after Levea. Specifically around the time frame we would probably introduce mounts, the first mounts, and so the coming regions being designed with mounts in mind. That being said, we're not making a bunch of promises or anything right now, but it's on top of mind for us. We also agree that mounts are a needed thing. The mount that you will start to use, and I'm fine being transparent about design. The mount that you will use in Levea for that content, since it's ultimately all the zones of Levea there's 8 zones in Levea. The first 4 are coming with launch, and that's content from level 1 through 10, and then 10 through 20 is what comes immediately after that, but you're still on Levea. The mount for Levea is the introduction of your glider after the dungeon in level 10.
Run out of.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We don't have to have a bazillion questions, and plus we're at time anyway, with 8 minutes left. So we just want to have more of these tavern talks more often when we hit little milestones, closing things, opening things. So
Yep.
Yeah. Keep the feedback coming.
I glazed over something really hard this past week and forgot to include it in our announcement for this PTR. Our dev blogs are making a return.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Let me
totally. We had a big internal discussion, and Arthur is putting together dev blogs now. He's coalescing all of the stuff that we are working on, everything that's happening. It's going to provide more, things into roadmap visibility, that kind of stuff. And you're going to start to see those dev blogs appear on IlysiaVR.com with its own spot. So even people outside of, like we mentioned earlier, not a lot of, even though there's, 9,000 or whatever people on 10,000 people on Discord, that most of the people that play Ilysia or even have bought it aren't here. And so we're going to put the dev blog up there and then put it, every time there's a new update, we'll let people know here on Discord to go check. But we do very much want to get back to those regular dev blogs. and more entertaining devlogs, not just text, like GIFs or screenshots of things we're actually working on, that kind of stuff, so you guys can see what we're really doing and what's top of mind.
Probably there an date for the.
I can tell you that we know that it's going to happen within weeks. We are aggressively going after it. We are internally testing as hard as we can right now, and then we'll keep you up to date.
Yeah.
But this isn't a month's thing anymore. This is we are weeks away from PTR2.
Mm-hmm. Pretty close. It's just a lot of content to implement.
That's a really good call out with the Trello thing. We should probably keep that updated, do a better job. It was one of those things that we really wanted to do it, and then it turned into, am I working on this right now, or should I be doing game stuff right now? And fell into the small team blues trap. But it is something we do want to kind of keep updated. It may, I'll be honest and transparent, it might get just replaced with the dev blog with more of an updated, like, here's what we've worked on recently, or patch notes type thing. So it is something we know that has kind of died off.
Yeah, we definitely need to. I've been using the word a lot internally. We need to reconcile it to make sure that
exactly.
we can kind of do a retrospective on it of like, okay, how well did we follow it? I think we did decent amount of things pretty good, because a lot of it was pointed towards what we were calling at the time faction squish.
Yeah.
The amount of time it took was probably more than that initial roadmap had said, but I think we can make some adjustments to it and realign it and get it in a good place again. And we want to keep it regularly getting updated, because the goofy thing, I don't know how the community feels about it, but if we put out a roadmap, it's going to change, and it's going to change a lot. And it has to. We're a game in development, and we want to work on community feedback while we're in development. And because of that, it's going to change. So I think everybody's kind of on the same page with like, all right, we put one out and then we got to work, and now we need to keep it updated a little better.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. If there's any other questions, keep the good feedback coming. As usual, you guys are awesome, and we're really excited for what's coming. So, yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Peace out, gang. Oh, hey, we're also bringing it down right now. PTR is over.
Oh, yeah. The PTR
Servers
is
go
over.
down now.
Right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.